Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining another episode of the PN Learning Series. My name is Shivi. I'm the host of the show today, and I am a product manager at LinkedIn. So, the Product Management Learning Series is a series of live streaming events where industry thought leaders and product builders share their PM career journey and lessons learned along the way to inspire aspiring and current product builders like you to level up your product career. Make sure you subscribe to our newsletter, link in the event description to receive a recap of key takeaways from today's event, as well as updates about future events. So today with me, I have a very, very special guest, Alan Blue. Alan is the co-founder of LinkedIn. Very exciting to have you here today, Alan, to hear about some early funding stories of LinkedIn.
Happy to be here.
Thank you. And Alan right now serves as the VP of product at LinkedIn and directing our overall product strategy. Alan focused on, the equity products, climate products, LinkedIn economic graph, working with governments and institutions in the US and around the world to share economic data to improve education and workforce policy. Ellen, you're so actively engaged in so many things in policy advocacy, creating economic opportunity, future of work, and climate change. And hopefully we get to hear some of that today. So for folks who are joining us today, please drop in the chat where you're joining us from. Say hi to Alan and what you're hoping to learn from Alan. We're getting some early highs from folks. I think it's a very international crowd. We have folks from Toronto, folks from India, from Paris, and more folks from India. So say hi to Alan and drop in the chat where you're joining us, watching us from. Now, Alan, let's start with maybe traveling down the memory lane a little bit. Can you walk us through, before you founding LinkedIn, like what were some of your early career explorations that kind of led you to meet Ray and then founding of LinkedIn? What was the earliest story and earlier career aspiration?
Yeah, well, I mean, as those of you who have looked at my LinkedIn profile know, I came from a very different background. I had my training is in the professional theater, where I was a designer primarily. And I spent 7 years doing that. But it was back in the early days of the internet industry. So that meant that basically no one knew what it took to be in the internet industry. And so basically anybody could join and participate. So in 1997, a friend of a friend introduced me to Reid Hoffman, who he and Reid were founding a dating site. And I was at a point in my career where I could go try it. That was actually a great experience, not only like learning a lot about how the networks and about how the web specifically was Web 1.0. Web 1.0 worked, but also it was a great time to learn about profiles and about how people represent themselves online. And then I followed Reid to PayPal, where I learned a lot about virality, because you know how PayPal works. It's like to pay you, you have to join. And then if you want to get money from somebody else, they have to join. An early example of internet virality. Those two ideas were foundational to building LinkedIn.
Absolutely. The profile aspect of dating sites and then the virality of a social network. That's best combination of the two, and that gives birth to LinkedIn. That's great. I also want to say hi to a couple more folks who just joining in. The chat just exploded. We have Louis from Nigeria, someone from Chile, Dallas, Taiwan, Turkey. It's pretty late in Taiwan, by the way, so people are joining on a Friday midnight, Saturday. Dublin, Quebec, DC, Germany, Vancouver, Spain. Thank you so much. Singapore. Here we go. Thank you so much for such an international global community, all eager to hear about stories about LinkedIn. So let's talk about what was it like in the earlier days of funding LinkedIn? Was it everything super obvious? Like you and Reid just figure everything out? Like what wasn't obvious? What were some of the most challenging moments and key lessons learned from that period?
So lesson number one is you're way better at doing startups after you've done it a couple of times. So if you're doing a startup for the first time and it doesn't work out, do it again, because the things you learn the first time around become the foundation of the thing you do next. It is really hard to start a business initially when you've never done it before, but once you've gotten in the habit, you can get really good at it. So when we founded LinkedIn, we already had 2 startups behind us. And the time, got to remember, so if I could just set the scene back in the days, it was right after the dot-com bust. So I know it was a long time ago, but 22 years ago, the internet industry collapsed. And basically almost all the tech companies went out of business, and there was a real concern that they weren't actually worth investing in. So it was in that environment that we started LinkedIn. The lesson we took away from that, and the one which was the big one from Web 1.0, is you need a business model to make your product work. So the early days, we spent a lot of time making sure that whatever we ended up building, it was going to be able to make money, that we were going to be able to support ourselves, because that had been the downfall of so many other internet companies. So when we started talking about LinkedIn, one of the first things we evaluated was, is this going to be able to make money? And for LinkedIn, the story is, yeah, absolutely. It's going to be able to make money because we're selling business services. And there's already a tremendous number of companies out there that are successfully selling business services. So we knew we were moving into a space which was well known, well understood, and it was already undertaking a lot of growth.
That's awesome. I love to, actually, I think some of the most notable startups started during the most challenging period, like after the dot-com bubble or after 08 financial crisis. And right now we're probably going into another macro environment. And I encourage people to, be optimistic about it. And I think a lot of startup actually come out of challenging periods. And I like that, starting with the business model, knowing how you're going to financially be viable first. That's a good mindset to think about too. Can you share about some of the evolution of LinkedIn, especially our 3 marketplace? I believe a lot of people probably still think of LinkedIn as like the primary LinkedIn.com, where people post, on fee, maybe looking for jobs. But can you educate us about, the 3 marketplace and how it has been evolved over the years?
Yeah. So when we first started LinkedIn, we had in mind we had in mind a tool for ourselves. So it was a very simple, we thought anyway, system, which essentially would allow you to search not only your connections, but also their connections in order to be able to get anything done in the world of work. So whether you were hiring, or whether you were trying to get your first funding, or whether you were trying to sell something, whether you're trying to market your product, whether you're trying to get a job, whether you're trying to put together a team, anything is made easier when you're taking advantage of your professional network, when you're asking for people who you know for help, and when you're available for them to give them help when they need it. So for a long time, we just sort of had an idea of just like, hey, you can do a lot of things with LinkedIn. And many businesses discover this, what happens is one group of people, in this case recruiters, identified what LinkedIn was good for far before anybody else. So what that meant was that we had recruiters walking up to us and saying, hey, we will pay you for additional features, for more access in the network. And that was our first business. And for the longest time at LinkedIn, that was our primary business by far. We were representing 65-75% of our overall revenue. But as LinkedIn has become more useful for more things, and more professionals are spending time using LinkedIn to stay informed, to help them do work, to look for jobs, obviously, other businesses have become not only as powerful, but more powerful than the talent business. So we still have a thriving, powerful talent business. But our marketing solutions businesses today, which basically allow companies, primarily B2B advertisers, to reach out and speak to individual professionals and decision makers, has been our fastest growing and is now our largest business. And that led us to say, actually, for us to build a better product, we need a better understanding of where people to come together to do business in the world of talent, and where they come together to do business in the world of products and services. We began to call those things marketplaces, because that's the basic motion that they use. It's 2 people coming together to exchange value with each other. There's a third one, which is the knowledge marketplace, which is where professionals come together to share news and information and opinion about professional topics. It also has a set of marketplace dynamics, 2 professionals coming together. That marketplace framing allows us to better understand, how do we make an individual user more successful? If you get a chance, everybody who's listening, if you get a chance and you can identify the mechanism by which value gets generated on your product, in our case, it's marketplace thinking. If you can identify that, then it allows you to be very specific and crisp about how to drive overall value for members and for the business. And I'm happy to talk further about marketplaces specifically, but that's, I think, the general rule is really understand how value gets generated, and that will help you make your product decisions and prioritize what you need to work on.
I think that's a great touch point for the next question. And let's double down on the value creation side of marketplace. How do you think about, what is value in a marketplace? How do you measure it? And how do you improve the efficiency? Because with any marketplace, there's always the two-sided chicken and egg problem. Mm-hmm. So how did LinkedIn tackle that problem? And we have so many marketplaces too. How do you do it, together in a coherent ecosystem optimized fashion?
Absolutely. So I'm going to use the talent marketplace as an example for us because it's the most mature. We've learned the most there. So I figured it'll be the best to give you examples. So the talent marketplace is unique to LinkedIn. And one of the things I always have to emphasize is that even though you can imagine a generic talent marketplace, in other words, one which is basically you have the equivalent of a buyer and seller. In this case, it's a recruiter and a job seeker coming together. That's an active recruiter and an active job seeker. The first thing you need to think about is you need to think about supply and demand. So for instance, and this is something I learned by observing eBay way back in the day and still observing eBay today. You need to balance supply and demand in a marketplace. Because if I'm there looking for I'm trying to hire marketing professionals in Germany, and there's nobody looking for jobs for marketing professionals, no Germans looking for marketing jobs, then that's a broken marketplace for me. So one of the things you can do to address that is you can say, that means we need to bring more people in who might be interested in the jobs in marketing in Germany. And that might even be saying, are there other environments we could open up? So maybe there are Austrian marketing professionals or Swiss marketing professionals, or marketing professionals from all around the world who might want to travel and relocate to work in Berlin for a while. Those are all options you can consider. On the questions of efficiency, because even when you have supply-demand balance, the system might not work very well. An example for us is how many in-mails, and I'm sure everybody here has received or sent an in-mail on LinkedIn. How many in-mails does it take for you to get a job seeker to respond? In other words, say you're hiring somebody, how many in-mails do you need to take? And if that's a very large number, then the system isn't working well for you. So our question there is, how do we make sure, not that we have to think about the person who's receiving the in-mail as well. So it's not a question necessarily of how do we make sure that the person who receives the email knows it's there, although that's part of it. It's also making sure that the people you're reaching out to are people who are well matched with the job you are offering to increase the likelihood that they are interested in actually receiving that job. So in our case, marketplace has different dynamics and structures for building supply and demand, which are unique to LinkedIn and the way we've built our platform. And when you build your products, don't do what LinkedIn did, do what works for the environment that you've created for yourself. And marketplaces, to be clear, are not the only structure, but they're a structure which works really well on the internet. So you do see them everywhere.
That's awesome. I love both when it comes to measuring efficiency, is actually both efficiency in this case in terms of number of email sent that converts to a hire, right? Mm-hmm. Or an interview, the most immediate step, and also about efficacy, like how effective it is in terms of matching the right people so that we don't waste time on either ends mm-hmm. for the hire and the job seeker. And
I would throw in here that for a marketplace, there's if you look at generic marketplace thinking, like observe from marketplaces throughout history, generally speaking, the way it works is that there's always a number which the owner of the marketplace thinks about. And that number is usually referred to as gross merchandise volume. And what it means is how many transactions occurred successfully within my marketplace. So at LinkedIn, in our talent marketplace, we have a notion which measures a similar thing, which is called confirmed hires. And what that means is that if somebody posted their job on LinkedIn, reached out to candidates, and then one of the people who they met through LinkedIn was hired at that company, that's one check in our marketplace was successful. So this is where it's possible to define what we call a true north. I think it's a pretty standard industry term now, but a true north, which allows you to always make sure that whatever effort you're doing, you're leading to the true north. Because whether you're increasing marketplace balance or whether you're increasing marketplace efficiency, those things always end up by increasing confirmed hires or your main marketplace metric.
Yeah, what I like about defining true north in the marketplace setting is coming back to the core of how do you create and measure value, right? Confirmed hire is the ultimate, is the end of the funnel, in terms of conversion, right? From impression of a job all the way to reach out, interview, and actually getting hired. So it's a measurement of value. And I think that's the key lessons. That's my aha moment when I learned about this concept. It's not about how many people seen the job or how many people applied, but actually getting it down to the funnel. I think I always try to educate people about LinkedIn. So people are asking about confirming the 3 marketplace. And I think Steph does a really good job sort of summarizing it. We have the talent marketplace, which does jobs and a bit of the learning business as well as part of talent. There's the B2B service marketplace for products and professionals and service professional. And then the last piece I think actually we didn't mention is the sales business. That right now gets bundled part of product and services too with the latest change. But sales professionals and BD professionals can use our product too. That's the other side of using the network, right? Like that can spin off different type of business with that. All right, let's see. Folks, please ask, Alan, questions if you have them. So drop in the chat. Don't be shy. So Alan, one thing I wanted to ask, one of the LinkedIn members also asked Nicola. So, but I would take a step back from his question. So I've been on some of your many product university session. And one thing that you always strike me, you're such a great strategic thinker. You break things down to like the first principle, fundamental levels, different parts. You have great system thinking of how input output works. I don't think everybody always think that way. So my 2 questions, one is at a factual level, like what Nicola was asking, what are some key factors or components that goes into defining a great product strategy? The second question I want to ask is from a more skill, habits, tactical things we can do day to day level. What are some habits that you have that help enable you to think in such a fundamentally strategic way, not just like plot in a framework and just rigidly trying to apply to a situation, but you actually being able to tease things apart and think at a very first principle way. So what determines key components of a great strategy? And then some habits or tips that you have that you do to help you think in a very strategic manner.
Well, I want to talk just a little bit about strategy and make sure we're using the term the same way, because strategy is one of those terms that everyone kind of has a different kind of feeling for what it actually means. I'm not even sure I'm going to be able to define it super well. But when I think about strategy, what I think about is a combination of the big vision that you want to achieve for your company and then the steps you need to take in order to reach it. So it's not a local strategy. People sometimes use the word strategy to describe something which is happening among a set of tactical steps in order to achieve something. That's almost always tactics rather than strategy. So just so you know, I'm framing it to say, hey, we have a big idea that we want to achieve with a big vision, and it sounds really hard to get to, but we have a plan to get there. So that's the part I'm talking about. So let me tell you a LinkedIn story there in terms of what that strategy actually looked like. So as I said earlier, we had a business model at the beginning, and the business model was selling business services, right? And the business services, we thought about all the business services LinkedIn is doing right now, we thought about back in 2002 when we were talking about the business. Recruiting, sales, marketing. We didn't talk about learning, actually. We probably should have. So I was wrong about that. But all of those pieces, those are great products that we want to be in. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a system where basically we are the primary place where professionals undertake these things via the internet. That's a huge vision, it's gigantic, with lots of revenue potential and everything, something you could possibly get excited about, but it's hard to believe in unless you know how you're going to get there. So what we did is we worked backwards from the goal we had. And the goal we had was, as I said, enable these businesses. So how do you enable a recruiter to be successful? Well, what you do is you make it possible for that recruiter to consider, reach out, and hire from all the professionals who are in the world, right? So in order to do that, they need to be able to go to LinkedIn and do a search and find all the professionals in the world in order to be able to succeed. And then how do we get to the place we've got all the professionals together in the world? Well, the answer is we got to figure out a way to grow effectively in order to be able to get to the place where a recruiter, when they do a search, they don't get a blank page. Instead, they get all the professionals who they need to reach. So what that meant is when you flip it around, we had a strategy which said, the only thing we have to get right is growth. If we can grow really effectively, then we can put lots of people into the network. And that will make somebody who's searching that network successful. And when they become successful at searching that network, they're going to be people who are going to pay us for access to that network and for the tools and services that we can provide on top of it in order for them to help them achieve their goals. So we had a mantra at the beginning of LinkedIn, which was growth, usage, revenue, in that order. 3 steps you needed to take. The step between usage and revenue was short. In other words, everyone believed we could do it. The step between growth and usage was short. Everyone knew we could do it. The question between 0 and growth was hard. And that was the one we had to convince people we could actually achieve. So one of the things to Nicola's question is, how do you make your strategy something which is compelling? Is you need to break it into steps, each of which feels achievable. Because if somebody looks at your strategy and says, well, you can't do that, that's too hard, then that's a real problem. You're not able to bring somebody along in that space. So that's one answer to the question. The second answer, I think, is, and this will get us a little bit to the habits. The second question is it possible to help the person who I'm speaking to think about the problem differently than the way they're thinking about it right now? So if I'd gone in or Reed had gone in to talk to a funder and said, we're going to build a gigantic, social networks didn't exist in 2002, a gigantic collection of professionals on the internet, and we're going to for recruiting, they would probably think about it one way, which was the way we did it back in 2001. And that was advertise like crazy until you had all those professionals who were part of the product. But what we did instead is said, no, we're going to take a different approach. And that approach is viral spread from professional to professional, inviting people to come use the product. That means it's going to be cheap to actually build it. So we're going to build our collection of professionals in the network by providing value to each one of them independently, and they will invite the people who they know, as all of you have. And that's how we're going to build the network. So part of bringing people along for your strategy is understanding that they don't think about the problem the way you're thinking about the problem. So making sure you understand how they think about it, and then telling a story which allows them to think about it in a new way, which is aligned with the way you do, is a big step towards making your strategy influential within your organization or without.
Are there things you do to kind of know how they think about the problem? Do you just like ask for it and then see how that's different from yours? Or
I think for me, I think the most important part, and maybe the hardest part, because you come into a strategy meeting to try to sell your strategy with a whole bunch of great ideas about the way you want to do it, and what you don't do is listen. If you sit down with any smart person who's thinking about investing, whether it's their time or effort or money or whatever it is in your strategy, listen to how they think about it, and then you can't always do it, but you want to hear what they're asking about. You want to hear what their assumptions are about how you're actually going to get there. And the good thing about developing a strategy is, generally speaking, you only have to do that 3 or 4 times, that listening effort, before you've discovered all of the ways in which people are going to be concerned or think differently about your strategy. The same way you do when you're testing a product, right? You don't need to put it in front of 1,000 people and get their response. You need to put it in front of like 6 to 8 people, and you'll get most of what you need from that. The same is true when pitching a strategy or any idea.
Yeah, I have this practice that I do with my team, which I call it a frequently asked question, or frequently frequent concern, common concerns, that I list down when I talk to stakeholder. It tends to repeat itself over and over, just like you said. Like after you talk to, 6 or 8 people, the same themes start to emerge. I also really like what you said about validating the assumption, because it's so true, but it's so core. It's almost like unconscious bias, because you assume something, and then that's the way how you think about stuff. But a lot of times that set of assumption could be different depending on who you talk to, where they're coming from, and what their perspectives are. I do really like this comment from our LinkedIn member Jaya, who actually also work at LinkedIn. We both, I agree with that. Like both, we like the way how you simplify a very huge, complex vision. Hey, LinkedIn had 3-4 marketplaces. It used to be, right, and into a very achievable, condensed strategy that makes it compelling and actually doable. I love the value creation aspect of how to focus on the marketplace as well. Now, switching focus a little bit, because during our intro, we mentioned that you are very actively engaged in shaping some of the policies around, future of work, creating economic opportunity, using our data. So what gets you most excited about the future of work? How do you see LinkedIn play a role in shaping that future?
Yeah, it's a great question. There are a lot of things in the future, I think, potentially to be excited about. Let me give you a little. We're having an experience right now, as all of us are who are paying attention at all, around how things like Chat GPT and so forth will change the way people work. And I think it demonstrates both some of the real possibilities, but also some of the real challenges about how technology changes the future of work. And to be clear, technology is not the only way to think about it. There are other ways to think about it as well, which I think are equally important. But for this conversation and in a short time, we'll focus on that. Chat GPT has the potential to help, I'm just going to pick it, to help people present their ideas more effectively. There's lots of other things you can do with it. I mean, coding and a ton of other stuff. But let's say to express my ideas more in a more compelling or clearer way. That is something which is really useful to all professionals, because not all of us are good at expressing what we want to talk about. So having a system like that, which can help me be at least clear about what things that I'm saying, I think is going to be a huge boon to people to fill in and help them improve sets of skills to allow them to achieve things. Also, as I say with things like Midjourney, it's like, hey, this is an opportunity for me to do sketches before producing a finished artwork more quickly, perhaps, right? But on the other hand, I think it's really easy to imagine the possible replacement or displacement effects which can come for the development of that kind of technology. And for a long time, that was all this rage, robots taking our jobs is a thing to say. And then people got out of the habit of saying it because it wasn't happening right away. But now it's happening again. So it's like, hey, maybe we need to dust off that conversation, because there was a lot of good thinking which came from it. That kind of technological change is happening very, very quickly. And that's what makes it so different than previous revolutions. Previous revolutions in technology happened over decades. These are happening over months. And that's a lot of change for the system that we all live in to absorb in a very, very short time. Our systems are designed were designed by very smart, capable people 200 years ago or 400 years ago. And they weren't used to things changing this fast. So what that means is that we need to be, and very much the way I think about it is, it's very hard to predict the future. but we need to have our values set in terms of the things we care about how people should, about how the economy should serve individuals, about what kind of responsibilities we as a group of humans in the world have to each other. And then we need to have something which is responsive as technology continues to change the way we live and work. We need to have a responsive system which allows us to do that fairly and inclusively.
I love the value-focused, value-centric approach, despite how fast things change. Some of the fundamentals of value never change. And for those who are not familiar with GPT-3, is a type of AI that writes like human. I guess that's the best way to give it a tagline. So go out and check it out. I definitely really enjoy playing around with it. Yesterday, I was in the office for our holiday social, and I can hear on the site conversation how engineers use it to write code. I use it to write some of my PRDs this week just to test it out, doing user research for me, generating ideas. Yeah. So definitely it's both exciting and scary at the same time. And it's not just even for blue collar jobs, right? Like even for office jobs, you feel like, wow, it's coming.
We all thought it was going to be truck drivers first, right? And it turns out it might be reporters. Or
absolutely.
I don't think it's going to be engineers anytime soon.
Yep. We are actually coming up in time. That's the LinkedIn community. Chris is really enjoying our conversation. Thank you, Alan, for teaching us the value of like 0 to 1. Thank you for answering strategy question in a very fascinating way, and fantastic to see how you as co-founder of LinkedIn talk about very complex strategy in a very simple words. I think those are some of your superpower, Alan. And so with the product management learning series, we usually ends with a lightning round of questions for every one of our guests. Alan, are you ready for the challenge?
I am ready.
Drum roll. All right. What would you say is your favorite product currently, and what makes it so unique for you?
Well, so the one I've really enjoyed playing with has actually been Midjourney. So it's a particular kind of sort of more illustration and artistic focused AI, generative AI on art, and it's fantastic to be able to play with something which is being developed as we speak and see what it's capable of, but also the kinds of ideas and things that it prompts to think about for the future.
That's the one I heard a lot about and haven't been playing extensively. Maybe that's my weekend homework.
An invitation, but I'm not sure. Or I think you have to apply.
Right.
I don't have a problem getting in though, so you should try.
Okay. All right. Second, who would you say is your product role model or someone who's been like super influential in your product career?
Yeah, I mean, so my co-founder Reed is, he had experience working in product, and when I joined him at the dating site, he had been working in product for several years. I learned a huge amount, not from listening to him, but from doing work with him. And very frequently, and I hope everyone who's listening to this has an opportunity to work with someone who thinks differently and distinctively about the product task. Actually, I hope you all get to work with several people who think in several different ways. It will make you better product people.
Absolutely. Diverse perspective. No echo chamber. What would you say is your one final, parting advice that you would like to give to product builders, in this global community?
Yeah, it's it's really to your point about diversity. So innovation comes from the ability to think about things in a somewhat different way than is expected. One of the things which I think led to a lot of strange, interesting stuff at the beginning of the world of the web, way back in the day, was that everybody came from weird backgrounds, very strange, different locations. So I think it's my advice for any of you would be take some time to look at things which are different, even contrary to the way you think about things. So this means look for things which are obviously different from the stuff you do right now and spend some time digging into them. My guess is you walk away with a few light bulbs going off in your head. You may not become a big fan of, like, I don't know, steampunk art, but you're going to come away from looking at a bunch of steampunk art with, like, oh, but I see that one thing which I want to make part of the way I think in the future. So be culturally, be intellectually, even physically omnivorous about the things you do. And it doesn't have to be expensive. It'll take some time, but it's going to pay off.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Alan. My summary is think differently, just like
Just like Steve
1984
Jobs.
Apple
Exactly.
Apple tagline. But thank you so much, Alan. We're coming up on time. It looks like folks really enjoy our conversation, the way how you make it really simple to explain strategy. The PM Learning series, we have a link in the event description where it links you to a newsletter where you can subscribe to receive update and a recap of today's key takeaways from today's conversation. So make sure you check it out. And also reminder to us all, Ellen, that we can always make our product better, that I can showcase links for people to sign up. And I keep passing those feedback to our events PM. But thank you so much for a very informative conversation. And it's great to hear from you. Thank you so much for joining the session and sharing your wisdom with our global community of LinkedIn members.
Absolutely. And happy holidays, folks.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks again, Ellen, and everybody. See you at actually next Friday is our last PM Learning series of the year. We'll be having a conversation with Dab Liu, who's the Ancestry CEO. And so you're going to hear from a lot of amazing people like Ellen and Dab. So yeah, make sure you check it out. And thank you so much.
Great.
Bye.